Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations with Vegan Women Leaders. I'm your host, Katrina Fox, and my guest today is a veteran of the vegan and animal advocacy movements. I'm so excited to have her on the show. It's the one and only Colleen Patrick-Goudreau. Now, Colleen is a renowned thought leader on the culinary, social, ethical, and practical aspects of living vegan. She's an award-winning author of 7 books, speaker, and host of the inspiring Food for Thought podcast and also the Animology podcast, which seeks to change the way we talk about animals. Colleen shares her message of compassion and wellness on national and regional television and radio programs, including a monthly segment on Good Day Sacramento. She's appeared on so many mainstream TV programs, there's too many to mention, but they include the Food Network, CBS, PBS, Fox, and her recipes have been featured on Oprah.com. Colleen, welcome to the show.
Hi, Katrina. Thanks for having me. Really good to be here.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. So I'm going to dive right in with one of the central themes of your work and even yourself, your kind of whole being, is that of joy. So your website is joyfulvegan.com. You've got a book called the Joy of Being Vegan, The Joyful Vegan, I beg your pardon. And I think you've got another book, The Joys of Vegan Baking. Now, I love that we have words like this in front of vegan. So I interviewed a mutual friend of ours, Jasmine Singer, recently, and their latest book is The Veg News Guide to Being a Fabulous Vegan. And I said, I love seeing words like fabulous and joyful in front of the word vegan. Why is joy so important?
Well, first of all, it's authentic for me. That's how I feel being vegan, in the sense that aligning my values with my behavior. I mean, I feel like I say that all the time, but it really is true for me. When I became vegan, it really was the manifestation of my values. I mean, that's what it is for me. I didn't want to hurt anybody. And there's this thing called veganism, whatever, right, you want to call it, that meant I could live my life in such a way that I could do the best I can to not hurt anybody. And if that's not joyful, I don't know what is. Like, I don't know what is more joyful than manifesting your values of compassion and kindness and wellness and integrity and thoughtfulness and consciousness. I mean, that's what being vegan means to me. And so it was very authentic for me. And I think I actually remember, it was years ago, I remember hearing, I think it was Julia, at the time she was calling herself Julia Butterfly Hill, then she was Julia Butterfly, She was Julia Hill. So I remember she came to a talk that I helped organize. And I remember, I think she called herself a joyous vegan. And that resonated with me. And I thought, that's me. And I think that's what's been really lovely about kind of leading with that. Like, that's kind of where I start. And I think it holds up a mirror for those who say, I'm that too. That resonates with me. And it has to be said also, I also have to explain that doesn't mean that I don't get angry. It doesn't mean that I'm not passionate about animal rights. And it doesn't mean that I walk around with like sunshine and butterflies, following me. Like, it just means that the core and the essence of who I am and how I lead and how I live my life is with joy. And I think also then it doesn't hurt that I'm obviously aware that it's also reframing this lifestyle in a way that's different than what most people stereotypically think about vegans. I'm aware of that. I'm not doing it as a reaction. I'm not doing it on purpose. I'm not doing it to be provocative, but I am aware that there's a stereotype of vegans being angry. Since that's authentic for me, that it works for me to be able to show up and for people to say, oh, wow, that's vegan. Like, that's what vegan looks like. No, vegan looks like each of us and however we present to the world. That's what vegan is. There's no one definition and one way veganism looks or sounds or acts, but that I can show up in my authentic self and say, this is what this vegan looks, this is what this vegan feels like, right? Then other people go, all right, okay, I can see myself in that as well. And I want some of that because that looks pretty attractive. right? So
I love that. I love you. Thank you for sharing that. And I love, like you said, about the reframe. And it doesn't mean that you're not necessarily angry or going through all these, different emotions. I guess some of it, when you think about joy, some people might argue, or, particularly, social justice advocates might argue, how can you be joyful with all these terrible things happening to animals, to people, to the planet? So how do you, and I know you say it doesn't mean you don't feel these other emotions, but how do you go about kind of keeping that essence of joyful when every day, we learn about, even as long as, we've been involved in animal rights and veganism, we still, I'm still horrified and shocked at, new things I didn't know. How do you maintain that sense of joy, and what tips can you offer for other people to do that?
I keep going like this because my cat is on my lap and his little fur is flying up as I'm petting him.
Hello, Charlie.
He's down here. So thanks for asking that. It's such an important question, because there's a notion, and especially in justice-oriented communities, that is, if you're not outraged all the time, you're not paying attention. And I think that does such a disservice to those of us who are paying attention and who do feel joy and who are committed and who are working to make this a better place. It's not a dichotomy. You don't have to be outraged, or complacent. Like, you can be both, passionate and working and active while also finding joy in the world. So I really appreciate that you asked the question. For me, it's a matter of what I dwell on. It's not that I don't feel frustration and anger and dismay and despair, right? I mean, it's not that I don't feel those things. I just don't dwell on those things. And it's a matter of what you want to look at. It's true that there's violence in the world and animals are hurt every day and exploited, and we come up with the most horrific ways to hurt animals and use them for our own pleasure. That is true, but that's not all that's true. What's also true is that there are people in this world who care, and they're innovative and creative and resourceful and smart and intelligent and forward thinking, and they are coming up with solutions for us to stop hurting animals. And that could be legislation, could be litigation, could be products, could be, just whatever it is. There are people who are trying to solve that and stop it. And also, I look at history a lot. And if you look at any point in history since yesterday, we are better than we were. And animals are, in the sense that people do care about the welfare of animals more than they ever have. People don't want animals to be hurt. That's why they tell themselves the things they do about animals being treated well, if they're even if they're being killed for, human consumption. We have to tell ourselves that because we don't want to believe that we're hurting animals, right? I don't think people's willful blindness is an indication of their lack of compassion. I think it's an indication of their compassion. They know it's going to hurt them, and they know they're going to be compelled to change if they know what really happens to animals. So they have to tell themselves other things. That's very different than, it doesn't matter, I don't really care. Most people don't say that. Most people say, I don't want to know. It hurts too much. The only reason I would say more animals suffer today than, say, even 100 years, 10 years ago, whatever, is because of mechanization and industrialization, because we can confine and kill so quickly so many animals. But that's not the same thing as we're less oriented to compassion. I think the public is more oriented to compassion. So in every way you can measure that things are looking more hopeful than not, then that's where I dwell, and that's where I look, and that's why I actually have hope rather than despair. It's because I choose to.
I love that. It's about not getting stuck in those emotions. It's not saying, we have to be all happy, clappy, Pollyanna the whole time. But and obviously, we obviously feel anger and grief and etc. But not to dwell in it or to get stuck in it. What do you use to get out of it then? Or do you because like a friend of mine who's a coach, she'll say, right, put a timer on it. Like, okay, you feel really angry and sad. How long are you going to feel that way for? Make it 10 minutes, 20 minutes. And then after that, you break your state kind of thing. So I'm just curious, how do you kind of get out of it? How long do you stay in something, and how can people get out of those states when they're in them?
I think one answer would be whatever we can do individually to hone our resiliency. Like, cause I feel like I'm pretty resilient. So I could just break down, cry, sob, weep, be overcome with sadness. And in doing that and crying and weeping, I'm also, kind of expelling that, which is healthy. I'm also very action oriented. And so I very quickly want to get into the solution mode. So it's exactly what you said. And I like the idea of time boxing it. I also like the idea of preparing yourself for it. So if I decide I'm going to go bear witness in some way, I'm going to watch a documentary, I'm going to watch an undercover video, whatever it is, or in person, I'm going to prepare myself. I'm going to make sure that I, kind of build up my reserves, feel strong before I do that. Be prepared to probably be sad and upset and angry, bring tissues, whatever that means, maybe some wine, maybe some scotch, literally prepare for it in whatever way you do, in a healthy way, obviously. And then also be prepared to get acting. Keep a notebook nearby, or your laptop or something, so you can take notes while you're watching this, and let the even journal after that, so that you can let the creative juices flow and say, that's really troublesome. I don't want that to happen anymore. And by the end of that, you might wind up realizing, there might be legislation you can help pass. There might be someone you can write a letter to, a letter to the editor to, et cetera. So for me, it's about preparing, being resilient, not watching the second video maybe that comes up after you've watched the first one. So kind of knowing yourself and not torturing yourself. It's not about masochism. And then actually getting to work and being part of the solution. That's basically how I, kind of do that very specific thing. I also tend to like to laugh a lot and, enjoy myself. So that's just kind of general, but the specifics is be prepared and get working afterwards.
Yeah. And I like what you said there about the joy, the importance of switching to that joy set. And like you mentioned, laughing, because another thing I think, particularly again in the social justice movements, is that activists often feel guilty for doing pleasurable things. It's kind of, and sometimes, as we see on social, sometimes, some people will even shame others for saying, well, oh, you went off and did that, I don't know, Kundalini workshop that I did last night, funny enough. But and I'm not saying someone said that to me, but, you should be, what are you doing enjoying yourself? You should be doing this activism 100% of the time kind of thing. And I think, but that's not really helpful. So I don't know if you want to just speak to that.
Oh God, and it's so self-inflicted. I mean, so much of it is self-inflicted. I did it. Everybody does that. Everybody does that guilt, and that we should be doing more. So that, I think, is just a lifelong, honestly, just journey, and checking in with people you trust and who know you, so that you can say, just help me look at this realistically. Like, I did this, and that today, or this week, or this month, or this is my plan. Is that reasonable? It seems like that's a reasonable amount to do. I mean, at least be able to check in with people who can say, absolutely, you need to take care of yourself. You cannot stay in the mode of constant aggravation and frustration and acting. So I mentioned before, get acting and go be part of the solution. You can't be in that mode all the time. You will exhaust yourself. You have to fill up your reserves. And so whatever that means for you to do that, you have to look at that being part of your activism. If that helps those of anybody who's listening who's actually more inclined to feel like you have to keep doing, just know that if you're taking care of yourself, that is actually part of your activism. If that helps to frame it that way. One of the things I've said is, the animals don't need us to be as distressed as they are. They need us to transcend our distress so that we can end theirs. So the idea that we should suffer, I grew up Catholic. I grew up, learning about all the martyrs. The only martyrs I ever learned about were dead, right? I don't want to be a martyr. I don't want to suffer so much that it actually kills me or hurts me. I want to be effective, and I want to feel good, and I want to do it. But I don't think we have to be masochistic, and we have to be honest with ourselves about that, and time box that. If there's something that you want to work on, time box that. I'm going to do that. And then time box taking care of yourself as well. We have to do both.
It's really important. Thank you. I'm so glad you said that. And I love the way you reframed it, saying self-care is part of your activism. I love that. I think that's going to be helpful to a lot of people. Thank you for sharing that. Now, Colleen, you are a prolific writer. You're a content creator, podcaster, speaker. You've done this for more than 2 decades on the subjects of compassion, and especially as it relates to animals and veganism. I'm curious, can you talk us a little bit about how you've actually managed to make a career out of that? Because I was talking to Victoria Moran, who was on the show a few months ago, and, obviously she's another well-known writer, and we were talking about how things have changed to some degree, in terms of writing and content creation, not necessarily being valued as much as it once was. So I'm just kind of curious if you can speak to a little bit about that, because I know there's a lot of people listening who would love to combine their passion for wanting to help animals or for veganism and make it into a career. So I was wondering if you could just share a little bit about that.
Thanks. Yeah, I am very grateful and very proud of that. It's something I was always very certain about. I'm a little bit stubborn and determined. And one of my dreams was always to, kind of do what I wanted to do for animals, work for myself. I worked in obviously I had many jobs before I, kind of got old enough to have a career. And I worked in, a good job. I was literally a content editor for a nonprofit organization, bringing in, charitable donations for organizations. And I'm very proud of that. But I wasn't happy because I wasn't doing what I wanted to do for myself. And so I was very clear all the time. And I really encourage people to always ask, what am I good at? What do I love? What do I want? And what do I want to give? And I was always very clear that I wanted to do something for animals. I wanted to do it on my own. I wanted to work for myself. I wanted to work from home. I wanted to make my own way. And it would have been a lot easier to just go work for a company or an organization. It would have been a lot easier to do that. And not everybody's cut out to do it yourself at all. I've always been very self-directed and self-disciplined. So, I treat my work the way you would treat, I'm a terrible boss. I'm the worst boss because I really put so much pressure on myself, and I'm very rigid, and I mean that like to myself. And so I wake up and I have my routine in the morning, and then I'm sitting at my desk by 9 a.m. I'm showered, I've worked out, I take my lunch, I go back again, right? So I'm very disciplined. If that's not, what is natural for you, then it might not work for you. But I always knew that. And so I constantly asked, what am I good at? What do I love? What do I want to give? And I didn't always know what it was going to look like. But I knew my skills were writing, my passion was writing, was words, was language, was sharing, was talking, was people. I love talking to people and helping people and animals. And so I just kept saying, what am I good at? What do I love? And the answers just kept coming. And I just kept doing what felt right, what was filling the need. For instance, when my early outreach was, tailing and, handing out literature about animal rights and veganism. I used to do street TV and hand out why vegans and show slaughter video on the streets of Berkeley. And people would say, oh God, this is awful. I don't want to be part of this, but what do I eat and where do I shop? And I don't know how to cook. And enough of that, I thought, all right, got to teach cooking classes. That's what people need. I had no formal training in cooking, but I knew enough and I enjoyed it enough to say, I need to do that. And so I started teaching cooking classes. From there, I decided to raise the funds to make a DVD. This was before the internet, so I had to raise the funds to make a physical DVD. I did that. After that, I realized, well, there's this medium called podcasting, which was brand new at the time, 15 years ago, and I started doing a podcast. And then people would send me money because they were like, I value this so much. Thank you so much. They would send me like $10 or $5, sometimes a kid would send me change. It was like, what? And I realized, wait a second, this is a listener sponsored show, just like public radio. Okay, let me create, at the time, it was like a membership program. And now we're kind of back to that a little bit with Patreon. So each thing I just did because it felt right, I would get the response that said, this is valuable and I want to pay for this, right? Money, value for value. From the podcast, a publisher reached out and said, let's do a cookbook, and then let's do a second. So I'm not just, it's not like things didn't just fall in my lap. I was working my butt off, but I was getting the responses back that said, this is working and this. And so I have a lot of different income streams. It's no, I could certainly do a lot better, especially today. I don't know if what Victoria is talking about is kind of, I mean, there's, sponsorships are now just such a huge thing, and collaborations, and, I could go do that. It's just not how I want to spend my time. But God, I hope that content, that writing and books are still valued. I think they are. I know I'm a reader. I still seek that out, and I think other people do as well.
Yeah. And how you find it like now? Because obviously back in the day, like with the rise of the internet, and then we've got social media, so many new people coming on with all the different voices. And so how are you kind of finding out that with all the, new social media platforms popping up left, right, and center, and how and where to kind of put your time?
I'm a believer in go where you are the most comfortable and find the most value. And like I never did, the TikTok stuff, like that just doesn't, it's just not me. It has to be me, or it's not going to work. It has to be me. So I've kind of landed on, mostly Instagram, because I really like visuals and I love the engagement over there. Facebook is it's just unwieldy. I feel like it's just very clunky. Twitter is just a cesspool, so I just will not. I don't use that. I don't use Twitter. I know other people do and do it effectively, and that's great. Clubhouse is the newest app that right now has. I am just absolutely over the moon. It is an incredible platform for authentic connections, and it's all audio, and so we don't have to worry about looking great and like being camera ready and the light and everything. It's just authentic conversations, and I've been really enjoying it. So that's what I would say, is that I just go where, and I spend the time where I think I'm most valued and where I feel like I can be most authentic.
Yeah, that's great advice. Yeah, definitely. Let's talk a little bit about activism and divisiveness, because obviously we've seen from the US presidential elections to COVID-19, we're seeing so much divisiveness, even among, the vegan community, among animal activists. Relationships, friendships have been destroyed. It's like, if you follow this person, or if you think this, we can no longer be friends, kind of thing. And I know this is an area that you've written about, you've spoken about, how to kind of, have difficult conversations. What are your thoughts on how do we manage this in order to create a kind of world? Because you don't want to kind of say, well, it's sort of got to be respectful, because obviously, people have got a right to be angry about certain things, and we don't want to kind of just go, oh, well, just forgive everybody and it's all good. Or, but how do we seem to be just in this us and them mentality. What are your thoughts on how we go forward?
Oh my gosh. Oh God, there is so much. It's so ugly. I tend to just really, I'm pretty allergic to that. I really tend to avoid, especially online divisiveness. I just don't, I don't think it's a productive way to have conversations when people are just, wanting to be right. I think that's ultimately what happens on so much social media. It's not to say that there can't be engaging conversations on social media platforms, but Clubhouse is another example where it's your voice as opposed to a written comment that you can't see the inflection of, you can't hear the inflection, you can't see someone's you can't see someone's facial expression on Clubhouse either, but you can hear their voice, and it's respectful. There's a lot of modeling of respectful disagreement. And I just don't think a written, non-inflective comment in social media helps. I just don't. So I tend to avoid that, and I tend to encourage other people to avoid it, especially if it's not productive. Like if it's not going to serve you, and if it's only going to make you mad or make you angry and hate someone, and what I just don't, that's not, who's that serving, other than saying, I'm in this camp, you're in that camp. And so I would just encourage people to be, I would just caution people about that. If there are people who are demanding a litmus test of you, I would be wary. I've seen that happen. I've experienced it, and I think it's untoward. So, but how do we do it? I actually think it's one of the things I've been really enjoying about Clubhouse is because we don't have these conversations with people we don't agree with anymore. We don't meet people who are in a different camp. We stay in our own little silos and we just talk to people who agree with us.
Yeah.
Never have the opportunity to hone our skills at disagreeing with someone. And that includes hearing someone else's perspective that is different than ours. And I think, Katrina, one of the really troublesome things about what's happening right now, it's not to say there wasn't divisiveness 100 years ago, 500 years. I mean, there's always been divisiveness. People have always gone into their own little camps. We're tribal, as a species, I think we are. But that doesn't mean we can't do better. And I think what's happening is we're doing worse because now there's the notion that by virtue of listening to someone I disagree with, I'm somehow undermining my position or the position of this other group that I agree with by virtue of just listening to someone else's perspective. I'll use an example. I'm not saying this is what one party would do, but I think American politics is a perfect example. A Democrat would say, by virtue of you being in the room with or listening to a Republican or following a Republican or a Trump support, like this is what's the language is been. By virtue of you just agreeing with that person, you're X. And it's like, there's no room for, maybe they just think differently than you do. And maybe your notion of their thinking differently than you do isn't what you think it is. Maybe it's not X. Maybe it means something else. And the only way you're ever going to find that out is by listening and practicing. Yeah, now I know, and I definitely don't agree, but now at least I've heard you and I can make an informed opinion as opposed to one that's based solely on tribalism. So that's on all of us. That's on all of us. How do we do that? I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there are people who are working, on having workshops and creating ways for people to do this better and nonviolent communication. And I think those are great things and we can all hone that ourselves. But it's up to each one of us to model that behavior and to not get sucked into that kind of divisiveness. I mean, that's what I do individually, personally.
I love that you've shared that. And I can see we've got some comments that people have said that. Yeah, Kathy Devine, Kathy, who's written a great book called Golden Age Politics. She's saying, thank you for saying this about politics. It's so true, isn't it? It's like there's no nuance, as it seems, anymore. And it's like, yeah, even if you're in the same room or you go to a website that you wouldn't normally go to just to kind of see, well, what are they, right? What's their perspective? And it's like, even that is like taboo kind of thing. So I love that you've shared this, Colleen. So 2020, obviously it's been very challenging for a lot of people, and I believe actually your mother died in 2020. And I read and listened to a little snippet you did on a radio show where you talked about that before that she started to lose her voice, and you actually worked with her, which I thought was really beautiful, to help her preserve her voice. I wonder if you would share that with us.
Oh, you're so sweet. Today is actually the day she died a year ago.
Wow.
And so she's on my mind a lot, all the time, obviously. But that was such an incredible experience. I mean, my mother was a talker. I fancy myself a talker, but my mother was a talker, like on the phone, like with girlfriends all the time. And I'd be like, oh my God, you're on the phone all the time. I just wasn't that kind of talker. She was a talker. Her voice was everything to her, and her relationships were everything to her. And she had a stroke that we didn't know she had after surgery, and we didn't know. And she started very slowly losing her ability to speak, and was confirmed by speech pathologists that it was indeed what's called expressive aphasia. So expressive aphasia means you can't find the words and you have difficulty writing, versus receptive aphasia, which means you have difficulty understanding words. So she had expressive aphasia, and it was really hard to watch someone just struggle. She would try to speak, and then you could see that she knew the word, but it wouldn't come out of her mouth. And so what I realized was, because she could still read, she came over one day. She was visiting from New Jersey and here in California. And I set up a teleprompter for her. And because if I said to her, Mom, say, hi friends, I'm here in California, I miss you, she would probably be able to start, but wouldn't be able to finish. But when I wrote that out on this teleprompter and I did it slow enough, she could read it. And I have a video of her, and she was reading it. and it's, it's jolted, but she's reading it. And so I wrote out the whole script, asked her, what do you think is okay? Do you agree with what I'm saying that you're going to say? And she did. And she read it. And I sent that video to some friends of hers, and they couldn't believe it because they hadn't heard her speak in so long. And it was really validating for me too, because I was getting some pushback from some people who were just like, nope, she's got Alzheimer's. This is what it is. She can never speak. It's dementia. And I'm like, no, it's literally the part of her brain that controls speech is damaged, and she needs help with it. So it was validating, and I think it felt really good for her. So that felt really good. And it was really one of the last, and I have some audio recordings of her as well. When she was here, we were having some wine and talking, and I hit record, and to be able to play that back. But she did lose her speech eventually altogether. And it was really hard. It affects your emotions. She was depressed. She lost all connections with people. I mean, our social, everything is our ability to communicate. So it was hard.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Now, you said it's been a year to the day. What's been the grief experience? But as much as you're comfortable sharing, what's that been like for you? I guess for someone like we mentioned earlier, you put out you're the joyful vegan, but yet it doesn't mean you don't experience things. What has been the grief experience like? And I know it's still only days; it's only a year, and obviously it's a continuing thing. But anything you'd like to share with us?
No, thanks for asking, Katrina. I shared a post today, and the most gratifying thing about sharing this is that I've heard from people for whom it helps. And that is incredibly, incredibly gratifying for me, especially because I had a difficult relationship with her for many years, and people can identify with that. And that, I was able to kind of come to a different place with it I think has been helpful for other people, because it was really hard. The grief experience, especially during COVID, was really rough, is really rough. It was rockier than a normal grief experience, because so much of grief is sharing that with other people. So much of it is the rituals of coming together and being able to talk about this person and cry together and laugh and tell stories and gather. And that we couldn't do that made this process so hard. It was very heavy. It felt very unnatural. And so I had to seek out rituals to find my own way. Things like, which we tend to do anyway, but writing her obituary was part of it. That was something that that meant something to me. I really wanted to get that done, and I did. And then it turned out that, really making a decision about her ashes was also part of this ritual that that you need to get through it. All these things are markers. All these things are ways to get through it. So deciding that we would bury her in a cemetery here in Oakland that's near my house, and I love so much, a historic cemetery. And it also made the decision for David and I. So we bought a plot where my mother will be buried and David and I will be buried. It's beautiful, beautiful spot. And that was helpful. And then I had a service where my friends came. We were all distanced and masked. It was about 4 months after she died. And that was so helpful. And I had no idea that watching the groundskeeper put my mother's ashes in the ground, put soil over the hole, hand us the shovel so that we could shovel some dirt into the hole, having the bagpiper play because my mother had said she wanted a bagpiper. I had no idea that was going to help with the closure. So, like, literally and figuratively, so much. So rituals really, really, really help make a difference. And now I'm in the ritual of picking out what to write on her stone. Like, that's pressure because I want to get it right. But all of those things help. And I think when we're denied that, it makes it harder. But it also really accentuated how much and why we do why we have ritual in the first place. So it's still happening. It's not definitely, it's definitely, I tend to be pretty much like, I'm supposed to be done. Like, I'm not supposed to be feeling. I'm supposed to be moving on. And of course, that's not how it works.
Yeah, it sort of comes in waves. So thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's important, as because it has been such a challenging year for everybody, and particularly on that. I attended a funeral via Zoom, and it was just weird. And but thank you for sharing that. So I want to, we've got in a second, we're going to move on to what we call, I've got some rapid fire questions for you to answer in like one sentence or less. But first of all, and this is something I typically ask people when I'm teaching them how to do PR, I'm going to put this to you because I know that you talk a lot about veganism and we've touched on some of these brilliant subjects. And I can see there's some comments. Patricia's saying, yes, I always like to meet people where they're at and not demonizing and, agreeing about listening to people. And I know you're really amazing on these topics, but I'd love to know a little bit more about you. So can you tell me what are 3 things most people don't know about you? If you can't think of 3, we can go with 1. But and I know I'm putting you on the spot, so take your time. There's no rush. But we want to get to know Colleen a little bit better. It could be anything. It could be an anecdote or just something unusual or.
All right. Okay.
Know.
Oh my gosh, what do I want to say? So I eat popcorn very strangely. I have a very strange, idiosyncratic way of eating popcorn. If anyone ever wants to know, I'm happy to share it. I've turned some people onto it. I eat popcorn very strangely. I think most people know I like Scotch very much. What else? What would be a third thing? I want to think. What would I say? My father was a professional gambler and he was sponsored by Trump.
Really? Oh my God. How interesting. Wow.
Never said that publicly. And you would not know that. So there you go.
Wow, that is fascinating. So you never know when you get curious about people. I'm glad I asked that. That's so fascinating because you just never know.
I'm the black sheep of the family, so just to
right. Brilliant. Thank you for sharing that. All right, so we're going to wrap up with the rapid fire questions. So these are just kind of for you to answer in kind of like one sentence or so. Like it depends. So like you can expand if you want. There's no strict rule. But what's the most courageous thing you've done in your life?
I think rectify my relationship with my mother. Yeah.
Lovely. I love that. What does leadership, I'm laughing when I ask this because I know you said you were a bad boss to yourself, obviously, but what does leadership mean to you and what style of leader do you believe you are?
Leadership is about empowering others. And I look at my husband, who is a manager, and he's incredible at what he does. And that's really what it's about. It's safe to say, I think I'm a thought leader in the sense that I really love the ideas and planting those seeds. I don't think I'm a very good leader in terms of a management style of people because as I said, I don't think I'm, because I put demands on myself and I regret that anybody who has worked for me, I mean, nothing terrible, but I think I have been, unreasonable. Expectations are very high. So what I've learned over the years is that that's what leadership is. It's not about you dictating what you want. It's about empowering people to do what is the collective right thing to do for whatever it is the goal is.
I love that. What do you love most about yourself?
My curiosity. Yeah, my curiosity. I love learning. I love people. I love knowing more and wanting to do better. There's so much to know in this world, and I'm very curious.
I love that. And just finally, what would you say have been 1 or 2 key lessons that you've learned throughout your life and everything that you've done that you would like to share with other vegan women leaders?
Just, it's all me. Keep getting better. I mean, there's so many mistakes I've made, but literally life is lessons and gifts. I mean, that's literally all it is. It's either I'm learning or I'm receiving or both. Like, that's it. Like, there's not anything in between. And if I've done something wrong or something happens that's wrong, it's usually something that I can learn from and do better in the future. Humility, just, I don't have all the answers, and other people probably do. being wrong is really difficult, but you just become so much wiser from that. You become wiser from being wrong. I think those are definitely lessons I've learned in life.
That sounds memeable. That is you. You become wiser from being wrong. It's true. And I think it's like, what I love about your work is that constant kind of, working on ourselves, which is not to say there's anything necessarily wrong with this per se, but, we can all grow. And I think that's so important, particularly when we're working in the social justice type movements. Often many of us are working from wounds, and that's, we have to kind of, I think, do that work on ourselves.
And knowing that everybody else is doing that too. Just having compassion that everybody is just trying to get by. You have no idea what someone else is going through in their lives when they might lash out or just say, we have no idea. So if we can remember that everybody is doing that, we might be more compassionate and patient and less inclined to judge somebody else.
Absolutely. I love that. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Colleen, before we wrap up today?
Oh, no, just really enjoyed talking to you, Katrina. Thank you so much for these really thoughtful questions. I really didn't know what to expect, and I liked that because I really enjoyed this.
It's been wonderful speaking with you. Your work is incredible. I highly recommend everybody do check out Colleen's website. It's very easy to remember. It's lovely to remember. It's joyfulvegan.com. If you're watching this, you can see it going across the screen. And if you're listening to the audio podcast, there's a link to it on the show notes page for this episode. But you can check out everything on that website, all of Colleen's books, amazing podcasts, cooking classes, lots of resources. So do check that out. Colleen, it's been absolutely wonderful speaking with you. Don't go away. When we finish the live, I'll just chat with you briefly afterwards, but it's been lovely speaking with you. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure.
Me too. Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Bye for now.